Dum-dum, beetle-dum-dum, beetle-dum-dum, beetle-dum-dum. There was a turtle by the name of Bert, and Bert the turtle was very alert. When danger threatened him, he never got hurt. He knew just what to do. He ducked and covered, ducked and covered.
He did what we all must learn to do. You
and you
and you
and you, duck and cover.
Be sure and remember what Bert the Turtle just did, friends, because...
Nuclear weapons. From the minute the U.S. military dropped bombs on Japan, few believed that atomic weaponry would be used for anything more than the destruction of humanity. There were others, though, who thought this massive power could be harnessed for something greater than war.
The great and violent power of nuclear explosions can be used for peaceful purposes. We call this project Plowshare. The reason for the name is obvious. For quite a few years in the Livermore laboratory, we have tried to find ways to bend this power to useful purposes. Geographical engineering, move great amounts of earth, build canals, harbors, use nuclear explosives, like high explosives have been used, for the purpose of mining. Use nuclear explosives in the bowels of the earth, using the earth itself as the crucible, to make new kinds of chemicals. These are just some possibilities.
Peace, terraforming, innovation. These were the proposed goals which Edward Teller and the United States Atomic Energy Commission pushed as they began what is now known as Project Plowshare. The project itself was a very simple idea. Use nuclear explosions larger than those at Hiroshima and Nagasaki to create quarries and mountainsides, carve canals into coastlines, and even create deep-water harbors for areas which needed a boost in commerce. While the program was focused primarily on the familiar testing grounds of Nevada's Mojave Desert, the Atomic Energy Commission and the United States government soon set their sights on much more isolated and desirable land, Cape Thompson, Alaska. What the government didn't realize, or more likely didn't care about, was that less than 26 miles northwest of Cape Thompson sat a village which had existed for thousands of years. Point Hope, home to a humble number of Inupiat people, was one of the few villages in the area which, according to the Atomic Energy Commission, would be affected by potential fallout of the blasting nearby. But because the risk of harming a great number of people was low, a point on the coastline called the Ogottolok Valley soon became the site of preparation for megatons of nuclear weaponry to be installed. This valley had been a great source of food to the people of Point Hope during the 9 months of each year when the sea was frozen solid and the land barren. Herds of caribou regularly rested and traveled through the Ogottolok Valley to feast on the lichens and other small shrubs which covered its floor. Point Hope would often bring back these animals to feed the families of the village during the harsh winter. However, though the bombing hadn't begun, the effects of radioactive waste were already taking their toll on Point Hope. In 1959, when a team of scientists had been mobilized to fully survey the lands of the Ogottolok Valley, they found that the people of Point Hope were some of the most irradiated in the world. The question quickly became, how?
Every detonation that was done at Nevada test site was up in the Arctic within 1 week. And so there were over 5,000 detonations. And because of the magnetics and the trade winds, the isotopes stayed up north. So it's all on the carpet of the Arctic. And it caribou eat that? And so there was a major accumulation that had occurred with the people that lived up in the Arctic that consumed caribou and other wildlife.
Despite reports of just how much the blasting in Alaska would affect both the people and environment of the Cape Thompson region, the Atomic Energy Commission pushed forward, creating a specified plan for the Alaskan landscape entitled Project Chariot. According to declassified reports from the Department of Energy, formerly the Atomic Energy Commission, the intended use of Project Chariot was to create harbors at Cape Thompson and Katala, as well as a canal across the Alaskan Peninsula at Port Mahler. By this time, Alaska had been signed into the Union as the 49th state. Public knowledge of Project Chariot was beginning to cause protests against the use of nuclear weapons, no matter the motivation. In response, the people of Point Hope formed the Inupiat Paitot. Together, they created a declaration of sovereignty against the U.S. government, one of historic proportion.
We, the Inupiat, have come together for the first time in our history.
We have always thought our Inupiat Paitot was safe to be passed down to our future generations.
The Bureau of Land Management has licensed the Atomic Energy Commission to do research on Cape Thompson, leading to a nuclear explosion.
We deny the right of the Bureau of Land Management to dispose of land claimed by a native village.
We, the Inupiat, strongly protest and request of the President of the United States that their nuclear explosions be discontinued.
With that declaration, Project Chariot was finally scrapped. According to the USDA Forest Service proceedings of 2003, it was not until the Inupiat, the environmental community, and the larger public learned of this wantonly destructive and arguably genocidal scheme was it unceremoniously shelved. This feat was something to celebrate, to say the very least. The combined efforts of the Inupiat people had stopped the strongest department of the United States government in its tracks and had preserved the integrity of the lands on which they and their ancestors had lived. But despite the newfound hope, a dark plan was once again unfolding without public knowledge. The Atomic Energy Commission had no desire to completely cease testing of nuclear weaponry. Rather than set off bombs at Cape Thompson, the government began to secretly bring in shipments of radioactive dirt from the Nevada test sites to scatter along the Ogoturk Valley. This experiment, known as the tracer study, wouldn't be discovered for 30 years, when researcher Daniel O'Neill would discover a plethora of documents which had been buried in the University of Alaska Fairbanks' archives. These files would detail the activities of the government after the conclusion of Project Chariot.
In 1962, just after internal correspondence showed that the AEC was through with Project Chariot, they authorized a study to be done at Ogoturk Creek to see how radionuclides, like those that would be ejected from a Chariot blast, would move through the environment of Ogoturk Creek.
It was in these archived records which O'Neill found that the government had dumped waste which exceeded by 1,000 times the allowed burial of strontium-85 and cesium-137. According to the Nuclear Waste Policy Act of 1982, waste materials with radioactive composition had to be properly stored within containers that would be held in clearly labeled facilities intended to receive such waste for storage, such as the Hanford Nuclear Reservation in Washington State. No dumping of radioactive material could occur without following the procedures laid out by this law. Nevertheless, the government had spread contaminated dirt within the valley where the villagers of Point Hope had hunted for years. With their food source directly contaminated, the people of the village found themselves quickly succumbing to the effects of radioactive fallout. Once again, the Inupiat people found themselves in a maelstrom of legal battles against the U.S. government in order to obtain answers as to why their hunting grounds had become a dumping site for highly radioactive material. It took years of deposition and long journeys between Point Hope and Washington, D.C. for anything to change. According to anthropologist Edith Turner, who was in the village from 1987 onward, the government blamed a heightened rate of stomach cancer and the deaths that it caused to an unhealthy lifestyle. Still, the Inupiat people persisted. Turner states in her writings of the proceedings that Dr. Bowerman of the Native Health Hospital in Barrow was able to trace an excess of 70 deaths from cancer in Point Hope between 1969 to 1993. This translated as an average of 57 per thousand per year. The death rate from cancer in 1950, before the dump, was 4 per thousand. The recent rate represented a more than 14-fold increase. Why the difference between those periods? 1995 was the year which the government finally conceded, agreeing that the cancer rates were likely caused by the dumping grounds. They agreed to remove the waste, though the efforts were seen as minimal by the village. People continued to die from the same causes, creating doubt that the entire site was cleaned. It wouldn't be until 2014 that the efforts from the Obama administration would finally help to resolve this decades-long battle which the Inupiat had fought. Even so, the people of Point Hope remain wary. There is still evidence that something may be buried in their valley, but many believe the answers will not be revealed for years.